Excessive Biden budget plan would cause national debt to hit nearly 51 trillion by 2033. And I got to say this country really needs to try to stop spending money because this is getting insane. The US national debt will balloon by nearly 20 trillion over the next decade under the spending outlined in President Biden's 6.9 trillion budget proposal released on Thursday. And by the way, why must everything be trillions of dollars now? Before it used to be billions. Before that it used to be millions. Why trillions? Why are we doing trillions? Under Biden's budget plan for the fiscal 2024, the gross national debt would surge to nearly 51 trillion as of the year 2033, up from its current level of roughly 31.5 trillion. The federal debt as a share of US gross domestic product, GDP, would swell to a record 110% by 2033, up from 98% this year, shattering a dubious record that has stood since the end of World War II. The portion of debt held by the American public would jump 19 trillion to 43.6 trillion over the 10 years. A ballooning federal debt means more taxpayer dollars will go toward footing the bill for interest payments on past spending rather than funding necessary projects in the future. The spending projections outlined in Biden's plan are excessive, said Maya McGuinness, president of the Nonpartisan Committee for a Responsible Federal Budget. At 6.9 trillion, spending next year would be higher than any time during the pandemic and about 2.5 trillion above the pre-pandemic level, representing growth of 55%. Since Biden took office in 2021, the White House has already signed off on more than $5 trillion in new debt tied to legislation and executive orders, including a physical infrastructure bill that received bipartisan support and a broader spending bill dubbed the Inflation Reduction Act that passed along party lines last year. Biden's latest budget proposal calls for 5.5 trillion in tax hikes over the next decade to offset the cost of various projects, including increased defense spending, a pay bump for federal workers, climate change related initiatives, and extending Medicare benefits. Man, this is so much money. So much money. It will require presidential leadership to enact real changes, and this budget does not go nearly far enough to make reining in our dangerous debt levels a top national priority. The White House claims the budget plan, if enacted, would reduce the federal budget deficit by nearly 3 trillion over time. Biden's proposal surfaced as Republicans and Democrats remain deadlocked in talks to raise the federal debt ceiling and avert the potential economic catastrophe that a U.S. default would bring. And this is the thing, too, that people need to understand. The only reason why our money is worth anything while we're in so much debt is because we back it up through the use of force in terms of the war machine. That is the only reason why our money is worth anything. This is so bad. Republicans who have demanded spending cuts as a prerequisite to increase the federal borrowing limit are all but certain to reject the president's plan. And by the way, this is also going to make pretty much your purchasing power practically worthless. Think about it. And this is like a personal example, right? Like 2 years ago, dog food for me, which you probably saw that one dog that I had, dog food was like 60% cheaper than it is now, right? I used to spend about 10, 15 bucks for like a weekly amount of dog food. Now it's like 20, 25 bucks. It's crazy. It's insane. Oof. They aren't adding in the disastrous effect of inflation on servicing the debt. They're still using Trump era numbers. Hundreds of billions of extra tax dollars are now going to pay the debt interest each year. Those tax dollars aren't going to provide government services or programs anymore, so the debt will get bigger faster than they emit. Debt spiral. The thing is, the crazy thing about this whole amount of debt is like we're going to get into so much debt that all we can actually physically do is pay the minimum payment on the interest rate of the debt, meaning we're not even going to touch the principal of this debt. Like, think about it. We're already at 98% of the GDP. Once it's over 100, how are we going to pay off the debt at all? Man, this is so bad. He has the easiest job in the country. Well, this person's rural county, but his country. Simply spend other people's money. Carry interest has to go along with a rise in capital gains tax and like kind exchanges. Unless you're a hedge fund or a private equity guy or a real estate mogul, you should be in favor. Also, billionaires should pay a minimum tax. I don't like Biden, but I agree with that part of his budget. Now, personally, the way that I view like taxes, I personally view that there should be zero tax loopholes, but like a flat tax rate of like 10% for federal taxes, and then states can determine what they want to do. But I think the best route would actually be more so sales tax for that, but have like sales tax that starts to like scale up depending on how expensive the item is, right? Because you don't want a situation where you end up having someone who's making like only $20,000 a year paying way more taxes than someone who's making like $1 billion a year, right? But you don't want someone making $1 billion a year getting taxed like at 98% because that's just insane. They're just going to leave the state and you're not going to get any of the tax revenue to begin with. So I think flat tax rate, no loopholes, but that flat tax rate is like a 10%, 15%, and a sales tax for the whole state with okay property taxes. I think that probably would solve a lot of the tax issues. And also, it's just like they make taxes so complicated and they know how much you owe, but they don't really tell you how much you owe. And if you screw up, you can get screwed. They're like, it's just, I don't know. The way that the government like operates is just so dumb to me sometimes. Like, just make things simple. Like, why make things so overly complicated? And why even do any of these bills as well that none of them even read?